Okay, so in this video, we're actually going to go through the next step in our series of adding a link to our custom web part. This is going to operate and feel just like it's out of the box. As soon as I add the link here, it adds it to my list. No refresh needed. It respects the background color of our sections as we demonstrated before. But the big difference between this custom quick links web part and the out-of-the-box web part is that when you add this web part to your page, it comes in with the links loaded because they're powered from a SharePoint list, which sets you up with customizing your navigation in many scenarios. A lot of goodness, a lot to unpack. Let's get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So in this video, as you can see with the out of the box, this is just a recap. If you're not following the series and you kind of jumping in the middle here, we have our out of the box web part here. We have our custom web part here. They both are quick links web part. The main thing that we're doing with our web part is that we have it powered by a SharePoint list. So we have this quick links list in the back, and that's really made up of a very simple, straightforward schema. The title for the link, the URL to the link, the description of the link, and if there's going to be sort ordered. Created by, modified by, those are all out of the box columns that you get with the list, so there's no customization there. We're only dealing with these four. Now, in order to get these links to show up in our custom web part, we have to go to the list and do that. But actually what we want to do is build a front-end mechanism to where the content managers can use a link and pop open a dialog, maybe not exactly like this, not this wide, maybe not this many options. We really want to just focus on this last option here, like from link, where we're going to give them a text box for them to enter in the link, enter in the title for the link, as well as the description for the link, and then we're going to stack it into a panel, probably like a 1/3. So maybe a panel more similar to this type of width, and this type of layout. Okay, so everything that you need to do to modify this link would be in the panel. That's what we want to build in this video. So in order to get started, let's go ahead to Visual Studio Code. And what we have our main component here. And if you look down here in the render method, we have the customizer, which makes our web part support multiple colors in the different sections. And then we got some very simple markup, right? So we have a markup for the header. We have an overall container for our web part. And then this is where our repeating links kind of get mapped out. And then we kind of call this this inner component, or this child component, quick links item, which is going to render each one of these boxes, right, which have all the link details inside of it. So if we look at the out of the box as our style guide, we notice that we have a header, and in between the header and the list of collection of links, we're going to have the add link. So that's where we want to add it. So in our markup, it's going to be this area here, the one that's actually kind of highlighted out. So we're going to make up a component. Let's just call this add link. And this could be a self-closing tag, so that way I kind of gravitate towards the self-closing tags because I find myself swapping these out a lot, especially when dealing with the Fluent UI library, because I may find another component, UI component, that's better suited. So this is just going to be a placeholder. So let's just go ahead and build this out. Let's just build out the baseline for this new add link component. Now, if we look at their project structure, this is under web parts, this project supports multiple web parts. Right now we only have one. So we want to leave room just in case we want to add additional web parts to this solution or this package. Underneath that, we have our main component. No, I'm sorry, this is the name of our web part. And then we have our main component, which is going to be in this components folder. And then actually right now we have a flat list. Right, so we have a flat list of 2 components. This is our main class component. Everything else is functional. And then we have our interfaces, and then we have our sample document item there as well. So what I've seen just watching videos from other React tutorials, they actually have a folder for each other child component. So ideally, this quick link item probably should be in its own folder. Quick links in general probably should be in its own folder. And we just compartmentalize these different components using a folder. within this folder, you want to have everything related to the add link panel in that subfolder. So in our scenario, let's just do some copy and paste to kind of save on time. I know I want, from here on out, I only want to deal with functional components. I don't want to deal with a class component, right? Because again, our class, the way we're structured, our class component does all of our service calls, right? So in this case, like post and gets and puts or patches, whatever the scenario may be, all of that's going to be handled here in our component class. And all of our child components are really just going to be stateless in the sense that they're going to be passed through properties, what they should render. And if there's a click event or something like that that they need to handle, then we're going to pass a function as a property. They would trigger that function, and we would handle the definition of that function right here, right? So with all of that said, everything that we do in the add link panel should be in this folder. So let's copy one of these functional components. So this is a nice one. So let's just copy this. And basically what I'm doing, I'm trying to get like a baseline. I'm sure there's an easier way to do that. I just don't know how you, because I know some of these solutions have like gulp packages or utilities that you can call a command and it would actually create a component for you wired up with everything that it needs. I just don't know the syntax for that, or even if SPFx supports that in their Yeoman generator. So with all that said, I'm just copying a sample function component. Let's just go ahead and rename this to add link panel. And sometimes you may not get these names right? So just be prepared that if you come up with a better name throughout your project or throughout your process, you're going to have to refactor. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes there are good names and then there are better names. But, you know, just get started. Don't spend analysis paralysis trying to figure out the right naming or naming convention, right? That just comes along with time and usually kind of later in the cycle. So with this add panel, I want to rip everything out. So the only thing I really want to, like, I think the consistent pattern I want to show in my panels is probably like, as far as styling, it's probably like this container style, just going to be the container of that component. Outside of that, everything else is just going to be just kind of like a boilerplate, so to speak. So let's just rip all of this other stuff out. This is all unique to that quick link item, these styles here. And I'm going to rip the guts out of this style. And then definitely all of this logic to determine the width, right? We kind of played with that in the previous video. We're going to rip all that out. So really, if I had a template that I want to use to create my components, it would look something like this, right? And now just to kind of test, I usually do something like a hello world and just say like add link panel, just to make sure I have my plumbing in place. And then as far as the naming, I need to go ahead and up this, so add link panel. And what this is going to be responsible for, this is going to be responsible for this add link as well as the panel that comes with that. So this one component that displays this link will handle the click event and all this and everything to handle adding the new link to this collection, right? And that's why we call it add link panel. Now, with that said, I have a lot of unused imports that came along with the ride, so I use my quick fix and say delete any unused declarations, and then I'm gonna just go ahead and save that. So now the other thing I want to do with my props, this actually should be add link panel props. Let's rename that. That name probably is a little too verbose, but I know my interfaces usually have props from our property interfaces, and then here just rename this add link panel props, right? And this is going to be very simple. What I do want the caller, the parent component, to pass in is probably the name of this link, right? Not necessarily the icon. I guess we could do both, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to give them the flexibility to do the name, but I know it's going to be an ad, so we're going to provide that icon for them. So with that, I just probably want to, one of the props I know I need is the button title, right? Everything else I want to grow into, so I'm going to delete that for now. And then I'll go ahead and save that. So now the other thing I want to do, I know that this is going to bring in props, and I want to wire this up to use that interface. right? To kind of type safe everything coming in. And of course, you will see throughout the video that interface is going to grow. We're going to have a function in there. We're going to have a whole bunch of other good things in there. So it's going to be all good in the neighborhood. Okay, so here we go in our class component. Now we should be able to find this guy, right? Nope, if you spell it right. So what do we call it? Add link panel. And now my quick fix hopefully can help me bring that in. And I'm not fighting with the syntax and trying to figure out the right path, structure, and all this other stuff. All right, so now I have a red squiggly. It brought it in, but I have the red squiggly because I defined the interface, and now it's looking for the button title. So let's just add that, and that's just going to be static tech add links. All right, so let's just save this. Shift Alt F, make sure my alignment and structure is right. And now what I do, I come here, hit refresh, and if we're good, I should get a static text that says like hello from panel. Perfect. So this is a nice warm and fuzzy, let me know that I'm wired up. I have that panel correctly wired up to this parent component, and we're ready to start our implementation. Okay, so in our panel component, the first thing we want to do, let's get rid of this. That was a nice placeholder, we're good. And let's replace this with a button. So the button that I need, I'm not that familiar with all of the buttons that comes with the Fluent UI. So I'm gonna just go with a primary button component for now, self-closing tag. And if I mouse over that, quick fix is gonna help bring that in for me. And I know that this button, I think it has like a text attribute, which gives me the name of the button. And because we allow our parent component to pass that in, we're just going to name that props dot, and then there's my button title. So I should at least have that much. So if I save this, hit refresh, let's see what happens. Here, it probably was too early. Remember, you have to wait for, what's going on here? Remember, you have to wait for the purple. See, I run into this every now and then, and I don't know why, but sometimes these changes are not detected to where I get that live reload, right? So I'm like, I'm fixing the space here, and I'm clicking save, Control S, and I don't see my build kicking off. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and stop this. And let's give this one last chance to get its life right. So I stopped it. To stop that is Control C. That stops the Node.js server from running. And then I did relaunch the gulp serve to kind of get this to run again. Okay, so there's my change. There's my add link. It came in with a nasty button. I want that type of button. For now, I think we're good to go. All right, and we can always go in and swap that in. That's easy. The next thing we want to do is bring in our panel. So our panel component is the magic for what pops open over to the right, and there's many different options here. So let me just go ahead and bring that in as a quick fix. Add that in from React, and then in our panel we have header text, and really that's just going to be the name. So when you pop this open here, this name here where it says recent items, that's the name that you give your panel. And again, that example of a panel is not good. So what we're shooting for is this name here, quick links, and then you're going to get like this X to dismiss the panel. So really, when we start launching the panel, I'll keep hitting the wrong one. When we start launching this panel, that's what we're going to get, right? So we're just going to get this one panel here with a close button and a title. All right, so the header text, let's just call it add links. Add a new link or something like that. All right, and then what you put in the body of here is what's going to pop up in here, right? So really just that's the body. Anything that you put between that panel tag is going to automatically push there. And in our intents and purposes, that's going to be our form components, right? Our input tags to capture the URL, the title, and the description for the link. So in order to bring that in, what we want to use is a text field component. And again, this could be self-closing. And with that text field component, there is a label that comes along with that. And the label is really just that text that's around the input field that lets the user know what type of data or what that field represent. So in this case, we want to just put title, because this is going to be the link title. I want to copy this, paste this out, and then here I want to put the URL. So that's the link URL. And then the last one is going to be description. Now, of course, you can use this using the regular HTML for input tags, and then you put the right type on there if it's text or a text area or a button in that scenario. Like whatever you need, you can do. You can alter input tag, or you can use the Fluent UI component. I built this sample using the Fluent UI component. I think it's a little bit verbose, especially when we start using like the React hook to save the information that's captured from this. It gets kind of verbose and wonky because these components account for a lot of different scenarios. So I think if you want to keep your HTML clean and maybe keep your code clean, I would probably recommend, like if I had to do it all over, I probably would go with straight up HTML here versus using the Fluent UI component. But again, that's just one of those experience things that you kind of live and relive, and you learn and pivot from there. All right, so if I save this, hopefully, and I'm watching this window here to make sure on every save event, this thing restarts and does my gulp process. And now if I go here and hit refresh, I'm gonna have this add link, and I can click on this until I'm blue in the face, but it will not launch my panel because I didn't wire it up to do as such. So let's do this. Let's do what is it? Is open. That's the attribute. If you set this to true, I think every time this page loads, that panel is going to pop open. And let's just use that for now, just so that we can kind of get this thing styled up. Because trying to get this button to click this open, we have to get into the React hook, and that's something we want to grow into, right? So here, again, we're just styling. There's our input text there. I do want to put spacing in between because these guys do look crammed. I could never figure this out, right? I expect this header to be here at the top, right, next to the X, like the out-of-the-box panels are. But just by specifying the property for the panel, right, where it says header text, for some odd reason, it puts it down here versus up there in the whale or the gutter or the header area, which is odd. So we're not going to solve that now. You can probably solve it with CSS, just doing like a negative top margin or something like that to push it up. But we're not going to do that. Now, in order to this is something new that I kind of grew into from my previous video, and that's really using the stack component versus Flexbox. Let me get rid of this. I want to spell this right? So a lot of even SPFx or even some of the Fluent UI samples, they use stack a lot, and I really didn't understand it. I couldn't really grow to appreciate it. But I'm gonna tell you there's actually one small scenario that forces me to use it. And once I started using it, it kind of grew on me. I think I still will use Flexbox when and where possible. But in this one scenario, the stack definitely proved to be paramount or superior than the standard Flexbox. Now, understand this. The stack is Flexbox. It's just a component wrapper over the rendered Flexbox CSS and attributes and all this other stuff. But if you know its capability, and it's kind of weird, right? Because I don't like this naming convention, but if you understand its capability, then you can actually get it far ahead and quicker than sooner than later, right? So here's the one. This is the only attribute or feature that I really love about Stack that kind of made me take a second look at it. And that's the tokens, really it's the child gap attribute. So if you put in tokens here, this is the token attribute for the stack. And I know it's looking for one object. Like if you mouse over tokens, it tells you that you can do these like stylable tokens. And in a lot of the samples that you will see on Fluent UI with Stack, you will see this used a lot, right? But it's only one property in the Stack token interface, and that's the child gap. And really, this is the space between all your children that get rendered. in our case, the immediate tags that are under the immediate children under the stack. So here I can do, and I assume this is pixels, right? So if I do a 30 and then save this, something magical happens. What it's going to do is going to put the 30 pixel space in between these child components, and it's not, and for the trailing one, it's not going to add the extra space, right? And this scenario is important because if you look at this scenario here, even though we're using space between, this is my second to last item, or this actually is my last item because it's an odd number. It doesn't know how to treat this space gracefully. The children gap, is it children gap? The children gap handles that for you automatically, right? So if you say, I want 15 pixels in between all of these, it will know that if this is like, should be in this slot here, which is this render should be, it's going to put that space here. It's going to make sure that all of these read and flow as you expect them, and then put the extra space here in the whale, and it will handle all these scenarios, meaning that in your last row, if there's only one item, it will handle this gracefully. If it's two items, you won't get this. You would kind of get 1, 2, and then it will handle that. And if it's all three in that last row, it will handle that. That's the only scenario that I found so far. And again, I'm still kind of new to the Fluent UI way of doing this stuff versus just straight up HTML and straight up CSS, that I see that this definitely helps and works, and you would get a more of out of the box styling experience that we expect. Okay, so with all of that said, that's why I revert to this stack here, because it's going to go ahead and give me what I need. And then the other thing we want to do, I'm going to use another stack. Now watch this. Now I'm going crazy with the stack. I didn't want to use it before. Now I'm using it every opportunity I get. Now we want to put in two buttons, right? We want to put in the primary button for self-closing tag for saving the new link, right? So here, if I do the text, so here's the text for the button. Let's just say add link. I don't know the proper name for it. And then I want another button. And notice what I'm doing. I'm just dropping in these. I'm just dropping in these buttons and all this tagging without having to put any special CSS, right? I haven't used any CSS to date, and not to date, but as so far in this process, zero CSS, and I'm really just using these attributes. And this really kind of keeps your markup clean, because we're going that declarative approach to where everything we need for this tag to do is right here in the tag. If it gets too verbose, we're going to pop out to a variable like the pattern that we used before, and then handle it that way. That's like a really, really clean approach. And I guess, right, I'm still on the fence, right? I go in with all my eyes and my antennas up as far as using Fluent UI components all the time. I won't make that bold of a statement, but so far, if you use it majority of the time, you get a lot of things handled for you automatically. All right, so here we have our primary button. I want to show you what this looks like, and this gives us another opportunity to drill a little bit deeper into the capability of stack. So if I refresh this, again, I did an inner, right, inner stack, right, so I nested a new one, brought in my buttons, and this is not what we want, right? So we want these side by side, and we want a gap between them. So this is where stack really helps. So now if I go into stack and do, all I have to do is just say horizontal. It's a Boolean, but if I just state it without any values, it assumes true. So I want this to be horizontal, and I'm gonna bring in my token again, because I do want a gap in between my children. So I use this object here, and then do the children gap, and let's guess on a 10 pixels between those buttons. And I want to say that may be it. That may be it. Oh, we probably want to do, let's just grow into it. Let's just see what this looks like as soon as we add that. And that's magic, right? So my alignment is here, the gap in between, it knows to be in between these two. It may be on the end, but I don't care because I don't see it and it's not impacting anything. Another thing that you probably want, I do want more head space between my buttons and the end of this form, right? I do want more head space there. And I may want to align my buttons to the far right, right? To the right side of it. So in order to do that, so because I'm using a horizontal layout versus a vertical layout, there's no attribute for vertical. So if you need vertical, just remove horizontal and it defaults to that. But now if there's a horizontal alignment because I'm in horizontal mode. And if I do equal here and then the space, I get all the enums that are available. And I really just want this in. And that's going to be, because I'm doing the left to right layout, that's going to be on the right-hand side if I specify in. So if I go here, hit refresh, and just like that, I got my alignment there. And we all know that floating two tags side by side, that has its own challenges. Flexbox in general makes that possible. And then working through that alignment scenario could be a challenge within itself as well. Now, here's another beautiful thing about Stack, and then I'm going to let this go and then continue on with our wiring up, is the fact that you can put a CSS class in here, right? And we talked about how, I kind of morphed over time with using CSS right here within this component. Again, kind of keeping this thing contained, modularize my styles related to this component right with it. I minimize my external dependencies outside of the Fluent UI and the React and all those other libraries or modules that I need to bring in. So I'm really creating a nice story to make this self-contained, as they should, right? That's the whole concept behind the component strategy or architecture. So here with that, I need to put a style on here because I want to put like a top margin on here. So I'm going to create a local class, CSS class. And you notice that I name these before I define them. So I get all kind of wet red squigglies until I go through the actual implementation. And then basically, you guessed it, it's just margin top. And then let's put maybe a 20 pixel on that. And again, this is a support string and number. If I just specify a number, the pixel unit of measure is assumed. Okay, so once I have that, go ahead and hit refresh. And I think we're going to be done. Refresh again, because we're not done. This is not doing what it's supposed to do. All right, what happened here? So let's go to inspect. Let's look at my button container. There's my margin. Is that 20? Margin top 15. Did we specify 15? No. This margin top is being pulled from the child gap, I guess. It impacts everything. Isn't that weird? Yeah, this margin top, no, I should be doing 196. Where's my, so 184, because this is nested. Oh, I see what's happening here. I see what's happening here. Okay, let me see if we can figure this thing out. So if I go to, here's my stack. I'm looking at 196, not 186. 186 is styling, no, that's 184. 184 is styling all my children, right? And you see that margin there. That's my child gap there. 196 supposed to be styling, oh, it's being overridden by my parent. Interesting. Okay. Well, now what? I don't know, because I thought that was going to work. Maybe we should do a padding top, maybe? Let's try padding top and save it all. Yeah, so what's happening is that when you define these children gaps here, this children gap says the gap between this tag, these three text field tags and my stack tag is treating my stack tag as one of the children that impacted by that 15. That's what that sizing was coming from. And then I did a gap between these two buttons with this nested stack. And now what I'm trying to do is just put a margin between, a greater margin between this stack and those text fields, and it doesn't want to play nice. So now instead of playing with margins, I'm going to try to play with padding, and that's going to give me the same impact. So now I can increase individually for that one little child, the last one between here, and that's going to give me what I need. Okay, let's keep going. I think we spent way too much time on this. So now what we want to do is widen these options here as far as text fields to where the user can have more real estate to kind of play with the URL and the description. Our title, we expect those to stay contained here, right? But the URLs and descriptions, we know they're going to exceed the length of that box. And that's pretty easy because all we have to do here is do a text, let me see, is it text? No, it's not text area. What is it? Multi-line. So there's an attribute called multi-line. And again, it's a Boolean. If I just specify it without a value, it just assumes true. And then you can specify how many rows you want that multi-line to have the height for. And here I'm going to just say for my URL, let's just do 2. And then for my description, let's just do 3. Right? And what it's doing is crying because it says I'm expecting a number. So I need to go into JavaScript mode with the curly braces in order to specify a number, right? And now we save this all. All right, so once we do that, hit refresh, we should see our new sizing, and that's okay. They actually look the same, don't they? So one is 2, one is 3, but somehow they get rendered to look the same. And I'm not too concerned with it because the end user can grab the corner of this text box, extend it out, if they need to see more real estate within that. I think for the most part, we're good to go. Now let's wire up our React hook. Now, to get this to work, and you're going to see this used both in the form. This is what I'm calling the form, right? I'm calling these 3 items the form because I'm collecting input, and then I want to capture that input and then bubble it up to my parent component in order to make my post call to the SharePoint list. All right, so let's do Shift-Alt-F to get some formatting here. But before we get into that, I want to do something very simple. I want my primary button, when clicked, to open up this panel, and then when my panel is closed, to close it out. And I'm going to do that using a React hook called useState. Now, this was weird for me initially, but now I can't live without it. So here I'm going to just define 2 objects. I'm going to define a variable, and then I'm going to set is open. I'm going to define a function, and I'm going to set that equal to useState, right? And let's just leave this open for now. I'm going to get rid of this React. I'm going to force it to references in, so I could just use the statement useState without the React piece. So just do that import there, right? So make it a little bit more explicit. So now with this useState, basically I can set an initial value here, and let's just set the initial state value to false. And that's what's in that parent. And this supports multiple scenarios, right? So if it's a string, if you want this to be a string type variable, you would default it to a string. If you want this to be an object, you would default it to an empty object, empty array, ... You can do all of that. Now, the way that these are, and we're going to use both of these, so you'll see exactly how this works. But imagine this is just a variable, and this is your setter method to set that variable, meaning that you would never set this variable explicitly. You will always go through the set state. And basically what this is doing, this is managing the state of this on variable. So by using this method, it knows what state it's in at any given time, and it can react when there's changes to that state. And that's what makes it super duper powerful, right? And you do all that without refreshing the browser. So almost like an internal state management. So to I'm still kind of new to React, new as in I don't have the 5, 10, 15 years of experience as some of these like full stack or front end developers may have that gravitate to React, Angular, or Vue, or any of those other front end devs. So, but prior to this, to my understanding, they had to use a whole new framework called Redux, and it was very confusing. So with the latest version of React, as of today, their useState hook is the proper way to manage state within a function component, right? Okay, so with all that said, this is how we plug it in. So in the primary, we know that every button has like an on-click event. So let's just bring that in. And then on that on-click event, we just we acknowledge that it is a click. I'm sorry, it is an event handler. And then we want to say set is open. and then we just pass the value that we want to set. And in turn, all this is doing is setting that value, that true Boolean value, into that open variable. Now, once I have that, I can now have my panel listen to or respond to the value that is open, right? And I know this is a Boolean because when I mouse over the attribute, it tells me that it is expecting a Boolean value. This is why that whole scenario was set up as a Boolean, all right? So here we have on click is going to open that to true. So let's just save this. There's one more piece we have to do, but I want you to see the impact, and then you see the reason why we need to do the second piece. So now if I hit refresh, the panel should not be open. The reason why the panel is not open, because remember, we set the initial value state or the initial status to false, which means close. But now if I click the button, it opens. If I close it, but if I click the button again, nothing happens. So what's going on here? If I hit refresh, let's try it again. My first click, it opens. If I kill it, it won't reopen again. And the reason for that, again, this useState hook is managing the state of this object. When I click the button, I drop the true value into that isOpen variable. So, and then when I close the panel, the variable is still true because nothing else set it to anything else. Yes, my panel closed, but the value within my state object or my state variable was never updated to reflect the value of that close. So it's an easy fix. There is a onDismiss hook, right, our event that we can tap into, and we're going to write the same syntax. We're going to do our fat arrow notation, and then we're just going to say set isOpen to false when someone closes you. And you would notice that using this pattern, it works like gangbusters, because as you will see here in a little bit, there's many scenarios where we can have different buttons or different scenarios that need to close that panel, and we can just, you will see me call this value time and time again in different scenarios, and that's the magic behind it, right? So here we do refresh, go ahead and pop this open, and now this is going to trigger that onDismiss. That should set it to false, and this is what we're expecting. So now I can keep doing this until I'm blue in the face, and these guys are responding and doing what I need to do. Now I said I need several scenarios where I need to close this panel. My user may not come to this top right and hit the X. They may click cancel here. So how do I wire that up? Okay, well now it becomes simple, because now you say, oh, on click for the cancel, you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to do the fat arrow, set the isOpen, and set it to false. And the same is true for open. So if I had other scenarios to where I can have another action to pop open that panel, I would just, pepper this in the same notation everywhere I need that panel to open, and I can rest assured that the state would be managed and I don't have to do any weirdness behind it. Okay, so now we're good there. The next thing we want to do, let's fix our button here. This is actually driving me crazy. Oops. So we want a button that matches that scenario here. So let me actually have a cheat sheet over here, because I can't remember all the button names within Fluent UI. So I actually have a cheat sheet that's going to help me pull that up. So, okay, so that's an action button. So let's just minimize this. So that's going to be an action button. So instead of having this as a primary button, you want to convert this to an action button. And again, if you do these as self-closing tags, this becomes really straightforward. So I bring it in, say, hey, I want a different button. Go to my quick fix. You said, yep, I recognize that. Here you go. This is look like these buttons are all built off the same base class, so our base component. So these attributes remain true. But with the action button, I get a new attribute called icon props, and that's just going to be a simple property. And it looks at an object where it has a property in there called icon name, and this is just going to pull from the friendly name from the Fluent UI. Now let's just we know globe, right? Because we used globe before, and that's not what we want, but we just want to put something in the placeholder. And then I'll show you how to dig that up by looking at the whole Fluent UI library collection for icons. So here, there we go. So there's my ad. It has a little weird icon over there on the left-hand side. And I'm sure there's other attributes to where you can move this maybe to the left or to the right or stack them or whatever the case may be. I don't know that much about the action button component, but the Fluent UI will help you find that. Okay, so the question is, how do I get my names for my icons? So here I'm just do Fluent UI icons. Let's just go here. Actually, this doesn't feel right. I'm usually able to get that right off the Google search. Let's see, Fluent UI icons. This is one I'm looking at. It's still called Office UI Fabric. All right, so we're still in the middle of a renaming, so bear with us. So this is what we want, right? If I right click on this, it says copy the friendly name. That's what we need. So I'm gonna just select that, come over here, mouse over to where we have globe, do a Control V, and it's gonna bring in add. That's how you find it, right? So you just, whatever icon you're looking for, right click over it, grab the friendly name, and you should be able to punch that in pretty quickly, pretty easily, painfully. All right, so there we go, add links. So we're matching our margins out of whack, but I'm not going to worry about that. We're going to fix that once we fix this gap item here as well. All right, so now what we want to do, things are going to be about to get a little interesting here, because now what we have to do is capture all of the text that's being entered within these text fields, and we just want to console log them out, right? And what we're doing, we're going through the steps, and they're baby steps, right, on how do you get to capture the information populated in the form and then push that up to your parent, so that way your parent can execute the right function to save it to the data repository. In our scenario, it's going to be a SharePoint list, right? Okay, so to do that, what I want to do is and then this is, I looked at this a lot, and if you remember, if you've been following along with the series, I said that probably one of the most complicated things you can do in React is to deal with forms and capture that data and save it, and also naming variables, because we can spend a lot of analysis paralysis trying to find that magical name, right? So I found after some digging, I found a really, really good pattern that I really like using the useState hook in React to handle forms, right? And it's scalable. And that was the thing, and there's many scenarios out there, and some of them don't use the latest pattern, and that's why when you do a Google search on this stuff, you have to know what you're looking for, because you can land with a pattern that assumes that you're using Redux, or they had to jump through a lot of hoops to make this happen. It gets nasty real quick. So once you take a look at it, you're like, ugh, that was nasty. But this is one that I thought was elegant, it's clean, and it's scalable. So here we want to, again, I'm going to do form. That's going to represent all of my values in my form elements. And I'm going to set that to useState. And then again, I just want to default this to an object, right? And within this object, I know we have those three properties, right? So we have title, and I'm going to set the default value for title, URL, set the default value for that. And then we have description. So let's set the default value for that, okay? And that's what's going to happen. So what it's going to do is taking this object, is setting that object here, and then my set form, I can pass in these parameters, and we're going to get into the concept of doing a deconstructor or a spread, and we'll talk through that. And again, that's one of the latest React capabilities or patterns or features that they have, right? So with this form, the way that we use this, we go down to this text field, and if we were bringing in, so here's another thing to keep in mind in our scenario. We're only using that form to create links, right? We're not using that form to edit existing links, right? So, but we could, and we're going to grow into that. But for now, there's certain attributes on this text field that we can ignore. So your gut reaction may be to use the value, right? And then set it to form come on, form dot, and then whatever, right? So if this is title, that would be form dot title, and then I do value for all the other ones. But that's not our scenario, because what this is going to do is going to say default the value to this, and then whatever the user input, we need to capture that and then save it to our useState. Really, we're on the second part. We really just want to capture whatever they in. So we don't need to specify the value because it's always going to be blank, but we do want to capture what was inputted in. And we do that using this onChange event. And this is where things get nasty. And this is where, after going through this, I kind of wish I did straight up HTML versus using the text field component. Because using this capture event, it's like any other change event. I do my fat arrow notation, and I want to do my set form, right? And on my set form, I want to specify the value. So now I have to say, in this scenario, it's title. And I just want to set the title property, right? Normally, in a regular HTML, I can do I got to pass it, right? So this is my function parameter. And then after the fat arrow is your function implementation, right? So any parameter that you want your implementation to use, you got to pass it. So here I'm and I probably should wrap these around in curly braces as well. Right here, right? This is overkill. Like if you have multiple functions, like if I want to say, hey, I need you to set the form value, and then also I need you to do da 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 da, and also I need you to do da 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 da, and also I need you to do something else. That's where these curly braces really come into play. If you only have one instruction, then you don't need it. So it's a little bit overkill, and in my mind, it becomes a little harder to read. But let's just focus on set form. Now, if I do set form, if I was dealing with a regular HTML tag, I can just do dot target dot value, right, and be done. Right, and basically what this is, like, whoever triggered this event, that's the target, and which represents this whole text input field, right? And then the dot value is any other attribute that I want to peel off, and I can be done. But for whatever reason, this text field, and if you mouse over target, it supports multiple types, right? It says, hey, we support everything. What do you want? I mean, what type of type and I have to cast it. And because, you know, that's what this or is. It's like, oh, this thing could be an input, or it could be a text area, or it could be a generic event. So now I have to cast it, and that's where things get a little nasty. So I have to take this target, right, cast it as HTML input. This is where I'm, all right, I think HTML input element, right? And then from there, I should be able to get a dot value. Okay. It still doesn't like something. I might have to call a lifeline. I'm trying to do this without looking at my notes. Oh, it's looking for the, okay, so this is where we do the spread. So let's, I think this may be it. Let's see. Let's do the, come on, don't do that. Is it happy yet? Nope. Oh, you did the spread in the wrong spot. Okay. I'm not, all right, I need to do the spread inside of this object. Okay. All right. So, okay, let's unpack this a little bit. So what's happening is that, and this curly brace is getting in the way. Sorry. Let me remove this, because it's just harder to read. I'm purposely keeping this on one line, because once I have this, I can copy and paste this to the other ones. And the only thing I want to change is this guy here. All right, so here's the scenario. The scenario is set form is trying to set this object as a whole, right, regardless of the property. But what I'm telling it is that I don't want to change the values and the other properties in this object. I only want to update the title property within this object. So, and that's what this deconstructor or the spread does. It says take whatever values you have for all the other properties, go ahead and set those, because you know this set form is going to reset all of those properties every time. You can't cherry pick and say only for this property and leave the other ones the same. You have to pass in the whole shebang, right? So it's almost like a post versus a patch, where a patch says I got 20 properties or 20 columns on this record. I only want to update these two. This thing, it says, no, you have to set the whole 20. So instead of explicitly setting all 20 in their previous value, you can just say, you can use this deconstructor. So it saves you a ton, right? In our scenario, it's not that great, but imagine if this form was 20 form fields or 30 form fields. This is a lifesaver. The comma then says, once you set your default value, now I want to override this one particular one, the title one, and I wanted to set it to whatever value the user is inputting in the text control. And we talked about we had to cast this because this target supports many different types. So we have to cast it to the type that we're after, and then everything else is beautiful. This is nasty, right? But in the end, it's one of those necessary evils. Just like, okay, I'm gonna go through this nasty syntax that's ugly, and I'm never going to remember it, right? Unless I'm using this on other forms or all the time. It's just one of those things that you will always go back and reference a project that you finally got this working in. All right, so let's keep moving. So now what I've done, and I hate that my label's already on the end. Now I want to do the same thing, but for URL. And they do have a text area. So if I mouse over here, they do have a text area element. But I want to say I may not need this, but let's just copy it just for, ooh, please don't lose that. No. There we go. We worked so hard to get it right. And we still don't know it's working right. We just assume it's working because we don't have any red squigglies. All right. I changed these to text area only because I set the attribute to multi-line, which is going to make this a text area behind element, right? I still think the value is still value, so I'm not too concerned there. But the last thing I do want is to update this label, the last one, to description. Right? Okay. All right, fingers crossed. Let's see what happens. So this is going to do a set form. How can we read this out to say this is actually capturing? Well, let's just make sure it renders. Let's make sure we didn't break anything. All right, and then, because if you don't have that right, as soon as you start typing, you will actually get an error. So I'm triggering my change event just by putting something in there, but I really don't know if it's really capturing and doing what it needs to do. And that's why I need to wire up this add link. All right, so for this add link, again, let's create a function. So let's just say on click and fat arrow. And let's just make up something. Let's just say on submit. On submit. And I think that's it for now. And then what we'll do here is just create a local function, call it on submit. And this is going to really prime us to start to pass our function up to our parent. Let's say form captured, form fields captured, and then do comma, and then we just want to stringify that form variable. All right, and then for this on submit, so now every time I submit, what it's going to do, so everything that's captured through this nastiness on the on change event for each one of those components, I should see those respective properties get updated. That's the promise, right? If this works, I think we're really, really close. All right, so let's do refresh here. And now let's bring up our dev tools, go to console, clear this out. Let's fire this up. Hit add link. And just like that, it's magical. And it's pretty impressive to get this working on the first try. Let's just do HTTPS. Let's put some real URLs here, and then here's a sample description for Yahoo. And I spelled description wrong, so and I spelled Yahoo wrong. And then hit add. And what I'm doing is I'm confirming that what I'm expecting for each one of those fields are actually coming through. And so far it looks like it is, right? So again, the only nastiness is this on change and then really wrapping your head around the useState hook. But once you get that down, you're golden. You're golden. All right. All right. So now what we want to do, let's clean this up a little bit. So my cancel event's working, but my add link, I do want that to add and close the panel. So what we want to do on submit, again, once we have that, we just do set is open to false. Getting a lot of mileage out of the set is open. A lot of mileage, right? And that's going to handle that. So now let's go ahead and wire up our interface, because we want to pass on this on submit. We need to trigger the function to our parent and say, oh, here's a new item. Let's go ahead and save it, right? So in order to do that, we have to do some plumbing. The first plumbing we want to do is on our props, our interface, is to tell it to expect a function, right? And we're gonna make them pass this function, and this function should expect a parameter, because it should be the object that's going to have all of our link information, so our title, URL, and description. And to ensure that that's type safe and they know exactly what to pass us in the property names and what information goes into which slots, we want to do another interface on top of that. So maybe like a link props interface. For now, we're just going to do an empty object, and then the return type is void or any, right? We're not expecting any return type, because this is like a method. It's going to do its thing. It's not going to respond with anything. So to handle this, what we want to do is another interface. Now, ideally, actually, let's just do it. You want to have a separate file for that. Again, this is why you have a folder for everything that this interface needs. And then here you're going to say link item props, right? So this is going to be the individual link, and then the props for that. And this is going to be what we just said it was going to be. It's going to be title, and that's a string. And actually, all three of these are going to be strings. So let's just copy this. We have our title property, we have our URL, and then we have our description, right? And then this should be add link item props, and then just save it. And then let's get rid of all of the ones that are not in use, and that becomes very, very clean. And now we're ready to rock and roll. So this is where interface uses an interface. So in this handle add link function, right, we want to tell it that we want you to pass a link, and we expect it to look like this. So item link item props, and that's going to do my let's just get rid of this again. Unused, right? Because I want to keep this super clean, especially interfaces, right? There's no reason for interfaces to be cluttered, because their definitions are very straightforward. All right, so here I'm telling that we're going to handle the link. I expect a parameter to be passed, and I expect that to be this type. That's super duper important, because now we're flowing things down, we're flowing things up, so we want to keep things in alignment, especially when we're doing post requests. All right, so let's just save this. Actually, let's save everything. All right, save all, we're good. And now in our implementation, and you would notice that our class component lit up red, because it says, hey, something changed here. This is no longer valid because you're missing a property. So let's just do that handle event. And right now what we're going to do, let's just do a fat arrow just to an empty function, right? And that's just going to handle the syntax. It's still not going to do anything, but at least from a syntax perspective, we're valid, right? The runtime is going to be another question, but for syntax, we're valid. All right, so let's go into our add link. So now that we have our props passing in a function that we need to respond to when they want to add a link, we can just do that here. So we're going to close that panel, and then we're going to pull on props again, the handle link, and then we're going to say, okay, call that function, and then pass it form, right? And then we're going to end that. Now, this is dangerous. Not really, dangerous is probably too dramatic, but this is concerning, that you're passing the object but but the object is not defined with the same type that this is expecting, right? We happen to have a title property, URL property, and description property, but we can easily get out of alignment. So we want this to be strict based on that interface, right? So what we want to do, let's create a local variable, and this is just going to be our default values, right? So default foreign value, this is where we use that link props. Nope, be careful because there's two. There's link props and there's link item props. Link item props is our guy. Link props is something that comes from the Fluent UI. All right, so now we have that, and then we can set our default value. So basically, I'm gonna just copy and paste this because these are all prime. Let's save me a few keystrokes here. Right, so that's going to be our default value, and now we can just pass that in as our initial value for our useState hook. And now we're primed and ready to go. So this way, if something happens and we say, oh yeah, and item property should also have this property, right? Each link should have this property. These will get flagged, right? You actually should throw a build error. These should get flagged and say, you're accounting for these items, but there's no default value there. So that'll be your flag. And then you say, oh, well, how I'm handling that in my form. And then that will prompt you to add new field to handle that new item. So it's all good in the hood. It's just one of those things that if you follow the rules of React, follow the rules of type scripting, especially when you're passing props, bubbling down and bubbling up, you want to make sure that you have an interface to make sure that communication is extremely clear. All right. So now we have that handle, and this is going to fire. So now what we can do, we can go to our parent, and really all I really want to do is create and this is my class component, create a local guy here and call it add link, right? And it should expect a link, right, based off that interface again. Again, getting a lot of mileage off of that interface. And let's just console log this out. And then let's just say parent component. And then we'll stringify that value. Link. Oops. Oops. Come on. Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do, let's just call this explicit. Remember we did that fake placeholder here, just an empty object. So now we can empty function. Let's just go ahead and call our add link. And this is going to be wrong, but I want to show you wrong so that way you know how to resolve it. Now this actually doesn't, now this is the part that I'm not 100% on, to where I want to say if I pass this like this, it assumes this link object. I don't know. That seems like a big assumption, right? So I'm expecting, there's a cleaner way to do this, but for our intents and purposes, let's see if this works. I don't know if this is going to make it, but I'm saying that on this handle link event, I'm expecting this parameter, and I want to keep pass that on to my local method as a parameter, and everything should be good to go. Let's test it out. And then we'll talk about local functions and binding them in a constructor and what you really need in order for this to work as expected. So here, let's just do a F5. Okay, so now we have fresh. We want to bring up our dev console because we want to look and monitor what's being spit out in the console. And if I hit an add here, let's just put this fake stuff in here. And from the parent component, it did. It passed it all the way in. And we still reading this out in our local component, or that's fine. But this is magical, right? This lets me know this is working, and this made it all the way up to the parent, which is magical. All right, so now what we want to do, we want to put in our post request. So we want to wire up a reusable function within our utils. You remember, in our previous video, we set up this structure to where there's a utility module. Any reusable functions we want to drop in there, and we purposely, position this in outside of the current web part directory, because if there's multiple web parts in here, we have that these utility function, reusable functions will be available to them. And so far we only have two, right? So we have reusable for our section size, which we went into very, very detailed in depth in previous video. And then we got our reusable get data SP function, right? So with that, I'm gonna actually do a copy and paste here because again, this is one of those things like once you build it once and you have it working, you don't want to lose it, and you end up referencing it all the time. Because this is a one and done type scenario. Once you build this, you're just going to get a lot of mileage out of it, and you can use it all the time. We're going to walk through what exactly it's doing. I just want to resolve this this import right here. And quick links and quick fix didn't help at all on that one. So bad quick fix. All right, so let's look at this. So here, this is a post data, and basically it has the same concept as our get. It has our caller calling in the client, right? Because this could be all over the place. So we have the client being passed in. We have the URI of where you want to do the post being passed in, and we're going to build this out. So you will see how this is being used. And this is the most important piece. It's the payload, and this is what's in the body of the post request. And that's going to be JSON, and we'll walk through how do you get from an object to a JSON string in order for this to work as expected. These are the options that you pass when there's a lot of plumbing that this does for you. This is why we don't use like the raw, was it Axios? Yeah, AXIOS REST API call, because there's a lot of header information that you have to pass. There's, I think you have to even handle the digest and stuff like that. But by using the SP HTTP client, all of that plumbing is done for us. And really, we just have to focus on what is the data we want to pass, make sure it has the right JSON format based on the list that we're updating in our scenario. And then also, we have our async and the waits in here, so that way it reads very clean. So basically, this is very similar to what you have in the get, right? So in our get, we did the client.get. Here, we do a client.post. The format is the exact same. The pattern is the exact same. There's our URL. There's our version. And then this is the JSON that we're posting. Here, we wait for a response. We take that response. We stringify it. I think this is an object, right? Oh, it's a promise. So we get that JSON as a promise. We pass that back, and that's what it's expecting. And it's reusable, and you can get a ton of mileage out of it. And I wanted to say any post request you can use this for. And there's another one for a delete, and I don't know if we use patch or not, but if we get into a scenario where we need a patch, we would build something reusable like that as well. Okay, now how do you use this guy? So here we have we go into our class component, and we go to our add link function. And right now we're just doing the console log. So what we want to do, this is where we do our mapping, right? So we have to do our SP link. Let's just call this SP link. And we want to create an object based off of that. Now this is where you have to be very diligent, do your due diligence, and make sure that you're matching your column names, because that's what this is the only way that this works, right? So whatever column that you're updating, you have to do the internal column name right here explicitly, and then set the value that's been passed to you with this parameter. So in order to do that, we have to go and take a look at our list. So we have our quick links here, go to the gear icon, list settings, and now we say, okay, so we want to update the title. This is the title of our URL. This is the actual URL to that, and then here's the description. And again, this is where we can grow, right? Because we didn't handle sort order, but maybe in the next video we say, okay, now we want to handle sort order to where the users can specify the order that they want their links to go into. So now we have to, what does it look like to maintenance or go through a maintenance cycle and add this sort order capability. So for right now, we're just doing title, URL, and description, and I need to get the internal name. So here, to get the internal name, I just click on the site column, and that internal name is going to be right there in the URL for me. So here I'm going to just go ahead and set this to title, and then the value is just going to be link dot title, comma, and then let's keep going down the line. And just to kind of speed things up, I want to say all these internal names are the same as their display name. We kept this scenario pretty simple, but best believe you're going to be hit with a scenario to where they're not going to be one and the same. And this is another reason why when we rename these columns, if you've been following my videos for creating list schemas for any of these solutions, I'm a real big stickler about not putting spaces in your internal names. So it costs me a few keystrokes of naming these site columns twice, right? So I name them once with the internal name, I name them again with the display name, which is going to have spaces and all this other stuff. But this is the reason why we don't do that, right? Because if it had a space, now I need to account for like I forget what it is. Is it like a underscore 0020 or an at? I don't know, but it's a weird syntax to account for the space. And again, that's why we don't do it. All right, so now we have title, description. All this is wired up, and we want to call our utils post method. So that's going to be under our utils object. Again, that utils object was defined here at the very beginning. Very similar to React. It says whatever is in that utils file, that's the asterisk. Give me everything, and then set it to this local object, right? And this object name could be anything. I can call it Deshaun Utilities or whatever. And here, to reference that, I just do a Deshaun Utilities, if it was named that, and then the dot, and then it exposes everything that's available in that file that has an export keyword next to it. Because even in this file, I can have internal utility functions to kind of get additional work done that I don't want to expose to my caller. So it has that same public-private type accessor method or keyword capability with it. All right, so here we want to do our post. I should get some syntax help here. It says, okay, who's your client? Is that okay? So I need to specify my client using this, and then it's going to say, okay, what's your URL? I don't have one, so let's just put a string right there for now. And then it says, what is your payload? My payload actually is going to be JSON stringify of my underscore SP link. So my local variable that I have there, that's my payload. All right. And then I have to do the then notation and do a fat arrow. So let's just say it's going to return a D. Somehow I lost this. This is going to be D and then curly brace, and then I always have to spell this out, or else I end up forgetting the character or something like that. Let's do a Shift Alt F, just so I can see everything. And now I'm going to just say, let's just console this out and say something like SP post completed or something like that. For now, we're gonna do a little bit more than that. I think that's it. All right. So what we have to do, we have to solve for this, right? So the URL, I'm gonna just steal this, the same get quick links list. Right, that's where I want to use. So I would go here. I want to define this guy here. Actually, it should be one of my first. This is not going to change. And this is actually the URI. And then let's just replace that here. Again, this is and this is dynamic, right? So this is taking the current web, and then this is all hard coded, right? And there's probably another exercise we should do. We should probably pass this in using the web part properties to make this more reusable, and we're not locking our content managers into any specific list names, so to speak. All right, so once we have that, let's just Shift Alt F. I want to say we are good to go. Let's see what breaks. Let me save everything here, save all, right to the purple. All right, so now if I go to my, let's position this to bring our list up. And then if I hit refresh here, get the latest and greatest, click on my add link. And here, let's just call this Deshaun123. And then my URL is going to be https Yahoo. And then sample description. And I expect not to see the description because we do not account for that in the UI. And once I click add, nothing happens, which is not good. Let's see what happens. Let's see what's going on in the console. SP post completed. Really? But I didn't see anything. Oh, let's just check our list though. Deshaun123. Let's do this. In a few seconds ago. So let's sort this by created. Let's just save that sort order. A few seconds ago, that's me. That's my URL. That's my description. But that doesn't help that it made it to the back end and I didn't see a change here. And worse, and even worse, I have to refresh the browser to see the change. So let's wire up React to do what React does. So instead of spitting this out, which is good, I don't need this anymore. I think we're past that. Now what I want to do is to call the same that I do in my component did mount when it first loads, and that's why I can click refresh and see the latest, is because on my component mount, I say, give me the latest quick links. So in here, I'm saying I'm changing my quick links list. I'm adding a new item. So go ahead and fetch a fresh copy so that way we can see what was added. And that's what and understand where I'm putting it, right? I'm wrapping it inside of my post. And that's what this then says. It says, I'm going to execute this. And then when it responds back and says it's done, then I'm going to execute this because this is all async, right? So let's just save that. Let's go out here and hit refresh. And now the expectation is that I should be able to see this new link right away. So refresh here, click my add, and let's just do test 1, 2, 3. HTTPS, Yahoo, and then junk, and then hit add link. And there we go, right away, we get it. So we hit it again. Let's just say Deshaun333, and again, yahoo.com. I probably should copy this, and then junk. Oh. And you know what happened? I'm not getting these twice, right? I actually double clicked on that and it captured both of those. Almost like, you see that? I can double click on this and it, my close event's not fast enough. So it just duplicated it. All right, so here's the one thing. I'm not worried about that. That's a fluke. I'm not going to worry about that. If I hit it once, this gap here is what annoys me the most, right? Because we shouldn't have a gap in our layout. We want this thing to flow just like this, even when there's 2 on a third line where it requires 3. We want this to flow. So this is where, again, I went back and kind of retracted on my statement of I'm using Flexbox for this. I'm not going to use Stack. Because of the children gap feature on the stack, it makes it very, very useful because it does all that tricky CSS for us. So now what I want to do, where do I read it? This line here, 106, is where I read out my collection, and this is where I'm defining my Flexbox container. So if I look at this definition, I just want to make sure I'm accounting for everything. It determines the flex. It turns the flex mode on. It flex for a row. It allows wrapping, and then there's justified space between. That's going to be my children gap. So I can replace this with a stack, right? And then replace this guy so that way it's copacetic, and then following all the HTML rules as far as open tags and close tags. And then let's go ahead and bring this guy in, right? So now, the stack automatically going to turn on flex. I want it to do row. Stack calls it horizontal, right? I want to wrap, so I just put wrap in. And I also wanted to space between, and they call this children gaps, right? So the children gap is an object, right, with a single property, and let's guess on 12. All right, and then we say this all. Now, when I add this in, it's going to bring it in, but then it's going to skew my other widths, right? Because I have all this fine-tuned based on my previous Flexbox strategy, right? So here, good news and bad news. It got rid of the gap, and it's allowing this to flow as it should. But my children gap did not kick in for whatever reason. And I know why, because I went through this hiccup and scratched my head and pulled a few strands of hair out. The reason why that gap did not work is because I'm overriding it on the child component. So if I use the child component, so this quick link item where I'm designing each one of those boxes, if I look very closely at this container here, go to the definition, I'm defining, I'm killing the margin for all these scenarios except for what's this top, right, bottom, except for the bottom, right? I have a 15 bottom that I'm bringing in. So let's do this. Let's shrink this down. Let's be very clear on what we're going to do on the bottom. So if you're only affecting the margin, only impact that margin. And I know I can't use all 15 because what that flex gap does, it provides spacing not only in between, but also top to bottom. Like it's a gap it provides a gap between both scenarios, right? So if I do a 12 here, it's going to apply a 12 here. Now I can add for it additional, but understand like that's what it does, right? And I think this, if we look at this close, this space here may be double the space here because you're doing the gap here and the gap here, and that's why the gap, for left to right is going to be more than top to bottom. I think. I don't know. That's a huge assumption. So now if I hit refresh, I remove those spaces, and I actually drop my bottom margin down. And now if I go into preview, I get these side by side. Now notice, the game that I'm gonna have to play now is how do I get the right space in between here, and considering the right width within my individual item. And that's where you just kind of do what we did in the previous video, just kind of dial it in. So let me see if I'm gonna play around with this just for a little bit. I'm trying not to spend too much time on it, but let's impact the gap. Now it is good to know when you're using that children gap, what exactly is it doing, right? So if I select this 166, that's going to be one of my containers. So if I select this one, because we can see it at the same time, you can look at and say that that's the width, that's my bottom margin, right? This is me defining. This is not children gap. This is me defining this space in my item, quick links item. But this is the magic bullet right here. This magic bullet, that margin 6 is the children gap that's being applied by the parent container, right? And if I slide this over a little bit, what I'm trying to do, and notice how this thing is growing. Not only is it growing left to right, it's also growing top to bottom. And that's why I think this margin bottom is in play too, right? So now if I shrink, if I get rid of this and then just let the gap do its thing, I think I can probably get closer. I'm losing my third item on the row, and that's because of the width, right? So now I have to play with the width. And remember, we went percentages. So what if I, and this is going to be a little bit harder to style because it is all relative, right? Let's just do a solid 28, right? I feel I'm getting closer here. I still didn't get my third row, my 3 on the row. There's my 3 on the row. Right, so I feel like I'm less than a 28, and this is where you just keep, dialing in until you kind of get it to where, until you're happy. So let's do this 25. So I go less on the width, and then I do more on the margin here, And I think that's going to get me very close to where I need to be. Now, here's the problem. The problem is going to be, how do I translate this margin 10 pixel into this children gap scenario here? And I just don't know, because we're at 12, right? And it came out as 6. So do we double this, right? Just because, no, it came out as 6. So we don't want to double it, because then that'll put us at margin 12 pixels. I don't know. But you get the gist. You have to play around with this, right? So here I'm going to do a 20 here on the margin gap, because I don't know what this equates to in this world, in the CSS render world. And then my width needs to be a 2725. And if I get 3 on the line here, I'm going to stop, right? Because this is one of those things you can really just spend a lot of time on to kind of get everything copacetic. And the good news is it's just a numbers game, right? You know what levers to pull and to twist, right? It's just a matter of finding the right combination. Oh, the other thing is that margin bottom, we actually killed that altogether, didn't we? So that's going to be, where is this? On my container, margin bottom, instead of 0, let's just put a 1, just so that we have something. And we save it. And like I say, if we get 3 across, I'm happy with that. The other thing you probably want to look into is fixing the margin here, right? Our margin is out of alignment. So if I go into edit mode here, you notice that my at link is closer to the header. And then the margin that I'm defining here is actually between the at link and the container class, right? So that's one of those things that you probably want to look into. All right, so if I refresh this, I feel like I lost everything. Again, I'm going to leave this as an exercise for you to tackle, because I think it's really just a matter of getting the right combination of the numbers, right? As far as fixing this margin here, that's very straightforward. All we do is just go into our main component class, go where we have the header. If I look at this, it's doing a margin bottom. Let's just drop that down to a 1 pixel. And really what I want to do is this stack to have a margin top between the at link. And notice that I'm putting it on the stack and not the at link. And the reason for that is that if I'm not in edit mode, I still have it, which means that it should be on the stack to push it against the a top margin versus a bottom margin on the title, right? If I put it on the at link, that means in edit mode, I'm going to hide the at link, and then I'm going to lose all of my margin altogether. So I want it to exist in both scenarios. So that's why I put it on the stack. So now if I do class name, and actually let's just reuse our container, and we're just going to redefine the definition. So in our container, we were doing flex, row, wrap, and all the other stuff. So all this is out the window now. And let's just do a margin top. Oops. So a margin top, and let's just call it, I don't know, call it 16 maybe. And that's going to be 16 pixels. And that's going to be easy to dial in. Oh, and the one thing we didn't talk about is how do we get our ad link to disappear unless you're in edit mode? And that's pretty close, right? We can probably keep playing around with it to get the left margin and all that stuff, right? But how do we get our ad link to only display in edit mode? Well, that's pretty straightforward. So if you go to your web part, right here where you have like this, there's actually a property. So let's just call this is edit mode, and I'm gonna have to update the interface to reflect this. And we want that to be true or false, right? So is edit mode, and then we just say if this dot, it's right here, right? Display mode equals, and then there's the enum display mode, and it has both options, read or edit. So if it's edit, it's in edit mode. So now it wants me to define this guy. So if I go here and just call it is edit mode, that's a Boolean, right? Just save that also. Let's just save everything. So now we should be wired up. Is it happy? Yeah, it's happy. So we should be wired up. So now if we go to our main component, what we want to do is just pass that here. So in the add link, let's just put another value, just call it hidden, set it equal to this dot props dot is edit mode. So if it's edit mode, if it's not edit mode, it should be hidden, right? It doesn't know what hidden means, right? So let's go and define that in our interface. So let's go to definition, just so that I can get to the interface, and then just call this hidden. And again, this could be Boolean, a Boolean value. And then on the panel, and there's several ways you can do this, but basically, if I need this to hidden, to hide, I want it to return a empty component. I'm sorry, empty tag. And you have these empty tags, right? You have this weird notation here, right? So if hidden, so props dot hidden, return that, else return what we've been working on. And I can do a Shift F, and that should solve it, right? So now if I save everything, let's just make sure this all lines up and works as expected. Outside of our styling thorn, I think everything else should be good. So if I go into preview, I'm in edit mode. I'm not in edit mode. If I go edit, and this is working as expected, right? And I love this for hidden because I'm not putting junk in the DOM that I know I don't use, right? So my return method for this, it says, hey, I don't have anything to return, so here's an empty tag. I don't know exactly what this does to the DOM, like if it's just empty space, but at least I'm not processing anything in the background. And that's the most important part. Like, I don't want to process any of this in the DOM and then just hide it using CSS. I think that's just too bloated, right? This is a very simple use case, but if you're doing something very complex, you want to be very crisp and leave your DOM as clean as possible, and not just, render junk when, especially if it's not in use, right? That's it. That's it for this video. We have our ad happening here. Probably in the next video, I don't know where it's going to take us, but it does make sense to get this wired up to use real list names and maybe a URL. Because you have two strategies here, right? So if you only give them the ability to specify a list name, then you assume, the assumption is the list that they want to pull from is in the same web that this web part lives in. And that may be far from the truth, especially when you start doing some very tricky or really kind of mature or built out sites. You may run into a scenario where you have a root site, or maybe the main hub site collection has the list, and then you have all these sub-sites that want to represent those links. And I think what we're gearing up for is that once we get this custom web part in place, and we can work on the styling and stuff like that, I would love to walk through a scenario on how do you build a blog site using the modern SharePoint. And the blog site is going to be important because you want to have full control over what the potential blog post navigation look like, right? And or maybe just a series, or maybe like a podcast site or something like that, to where you have a series of pages and you want to manage that navigation between those pages in a SharePoint list, because it's more than just a page, right? It's more than just the modern page. You want to have more control over that. And those are wonderful scenarios to where these will come into play. All right. That's it for this video. Thank you so much. I know it's pretty lengthy. These can be lengthy because we go into in depth, and there's so much to unpack because we're dealing with so many different technologies and strategies and techniques within the SPFx. But thank you so much for hanging in there. Any questions, hit me up in the comments section. Until then, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.